A massive fissure has appeared on the Arctic seabed near Iceland. The crack spans 50 kilometers in length and 80 kilometers in width, spewing searing plasma from its depths. Initially, humanity dismissed it as a natural geological phenomenon, but soon after its emergence, Earth's climate and magnetic field began to shift. The sky was blanketed with dazzling auroras, and birds, disoriented by the magnetic disturbance, lost their way. Yet, this was only the beginning of the nightmare. The fissure is expanding at a rate of 10 kilometers per year, creeping steadily toward the mainland. In about 50 years, the Earth will split in two. This is the premise of Denmark's 2024 blockbuster disaster movie. The story begins with an eerie earthquake. On a small Arctic island near Iceland, a middle-aged caretaker is enjoying a typical day, playing fetch with his pet. Just as he throws the ball, a violent tremor shakes the island. Cliffs collapse into the sea, and debris plummets into the water below. Thankfully, the quake subsides quickly, and the damage appears limited to a coastal landslide. At first, the caretaker assumes it's just another routine tremor. After all, Iceland sits in a geologically active region, and earthquakes are nothing unusual. But what no one could have predicted was that this seemingly ordinary quake had unleashed a horrifying fissure. News of the seabed fissure was quickly reported to the Icelandic Geological Survey, where staff began collecting data on the phenomenon. But when the data came in, scientists were stunned. It wasn't just the seabed that had cracked, it was the Earth itself. The fissure stretched 50 kilometers long and 80 kilometers wide, continuously spewing scorching plasma from its depths. Even more terrifying, the fissure reached thousands of kilometers deep, potentially all the way to the Earth's core. It was expanding at a rate of 0.002 meters per hour, which equates to approximately 0.069 meters per day, or 25 meters per year. But that wasn't the worst of it. For every additional square meter the fissure expanded, the speed and depth of its growth increased exponentially. Calculations indicated that in about 50 years, the fissure would split the Earth completely. Under the sun's gravitational pull, the planet would disintegrate, vanishing entirely from the solar system. As the fissure expanded, Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere were disrupted, creating dazzling rainbow-like lasers across the sky. In response to the crisis, the United Nations immediately established an Earth-saving task force. Geologists from around the world gathered in Iceland to devise a solution. After intense discussions, they proposed creating a super-adhesive, a substance strong enough to bind airplanes and artillery, that could seal the fissure and prevent it from expanding further. This adhesive, made from high-density molecules, would be poured into the fissure, where it would flow deep into the cracks and solidify, holding the Earth together. The man tasked with executing this critical mission was Elias, Iceland's top geologist with extensive experience in underwater exploration. The team leader, Maria, had secured the most advanced deep-sea submarine from the UK for the job. Because the intense magnetic field around the fissure interfered with electronic equipment, the operation would have to be performed manually. Everything was ready. Elias and his colleague, David, piloted the submarine and began their descent. After hours of turbulence, they finally reached the seabed. The fissure was even more massive than Elias had expected. It cut through the seafloor, stretching east to west, and already appeared to be hundreds of meters long. Blinding light from the fissure illuminated the entire seabed, and the heat emanating from the Earth's core had warmed the surrounding seawater. According to the plan, Elias and David would pilot the submarine to the seafloor and use a mechanical arm to pour the adhesive along the fissure. Everything proceeded smoothly at first. The adhesive began seeping into the fissure, flowing downward as planned. But midway through the operation, strange flashes erupted from the fissure. In the disorienting light, Elias caught a glimpse of something eerie, shapes moving within the glow of the fissure. But how could anything be alive here, thousands of meters underwater, in such extreme heat? The first phase of the operation was soon completed, and Elias piloted the submarine back to the surface. He reported the strange phenomenon he'd witnessed to the team, but the intense magnetic field around the fissure had interfered with the cameras, leaving no visual evidence. Maria speculated that the flashes might have been a chemical reaction between the adhesive and the high temperatures. With no way of knowing if the adhesive had worked, all they could do was wait for the data to be analyzed back on shore. Elias's long-lost friends gave him a warm welcome with a celebratory gathering. In the middle of the party, Elias ran into his ex-girlfriend, Anita. Years ago, Elias and Anita were deeply in love, but his obsession with work drove them apart. When Elias moved to the UK, they lost all contact. Now, seeing each other after so long, the atmosphere was awkward, and after exchanging a few polite words, they went their separate ways. The next morning, Elias was on his way to the base to review the fissure reports when he suddenly felt his car hit something. He got out to check and saw a pigeon lying lifeless on the road. As Elias looked around in confusion, he noticed a horrifying sight. Dead pigeons littered the highway. The anomaly had been caused by the disrupted magnetic field. The birds, unable to navigate, had crashed into trees and other obstacles. This confirmed a grim reality. Earth's magnetic field was not only destabilizing but also affecting animal behavior. On the bright side, the first phase of adhesive pouring had been successful, and the fissure in the initial area had stopped expanding, proving that the adhesive worked. Maria prepared to initiate the second phase of the operation. Once again, Elias and David piloted the submarine to the seabed. This time, the target was a fissure located on a slope. To prevent the adhesive from flowing away, they would need to pour it along the slope carefully. Elias activated the mechanical arm, and everything proceeded as planned, until a system error alert suddenly appeared. After running diagnostics, Elias discovered the issue. The nozzle of the mechanical arm had malfunctioned and needed manual adjustment. With permission to exit the submarine, David suited up and began repairs outside. However, halfway through the process, something strange happened. A dark, shifting spot emerged from the fissure. David froze for a moment, staring at it, before inexplicably beginning to walk toward the fissure. Realizing something was wrong, Elias urgently called out to David. But despite hearing him, David continued moving forward, as if in a trance. Elias rushed out to stop him, only to find David crouched near the fissure, seemingly lost in thought. As Elias reached for him, a flood of memories surged into his mind, scenes from his past with Anita, moments he thought he'd long forgotten. When Elias snapped back to reality, David was gone. Shaken, Elias returned to the submarine and later reported the incident to Maria. He expressed his growing suspicion that there was something deeply unnatural about the fissure, something capable of manipulating the mind. Unfortunately, the magnetic interference had disrupted the helmet camera, leaving them without visual evidence of what had occurred. Due to David's tragic disappearance, Maria suspended the second phase of the operation until they could uncover the cause of the incident. Back in town, Elias sought out Anita to share what he'd experienced at the fissure. But before he could say much, a man and a young boy approached Anita. To Elias's shock, he discovered Anita had married. Awkward and unsure, Elias forced a polite greeting before leaving. At home, Elias felt mentally unbalanced. He immediately went to the hospital for a full checkup, but the doctors found nothing wrong. After days of turmoil, Elias went to see Anita again. It was then that Anita revealed the shocking truth. The boy Elias had seen that day was his son. Years ago, while Elias was preoccupied with his career, Anita had unexpectedly become pregnant. But Elias, unwilling to settle down, refused to marry her. The two had a heated argument and ultimately parted ways. Anita gave birth to the child and raised him on her own. Hearing Anita's words left Elias completely shaken. Just as he was trying to process the revelation, he received another call from Maria. The delay in the second phase of adhesive pouring had caused the first phase to destabilize due to tectonic movement. They needed to begin the second phase immediately. Stepping outside, Elias noticed the sky filled with vibrant auroras. Without hesitation, he rushed back to the base. This time, Elias was accompanied by another geologist, Laura. The two piloted the submarine back to the fissure. Upon arrival, they discovered new cracks had formed in the previously sealed area. Elias used the mechanical arm to pour adhesive into the fresh fissures. However, just as the operation began, the fissure emitted another series of blinding flashes. Before Elias could react, the mechanical arm malfunctioned. Elias wanted to go out of the cabin for maintenance, but the communication equipment had failed in the flash explosion just now, and they lost contact with the ground. With no time to waste before the adhesive hardened, Elias decided to take a gamble. He donned his diving gear and exited the submarine. As Elias approached the fissure, an unsettling sensation overtook him. His body felt as though it were no longer under his control, drawing him closer to the fissure. Inside the submarine, Laura desperately called out to Elias, but no matter how loudly she shouted, he couldn't hear her. In a daze, Elias found himself at the edge of the fissure. As he peered inside, he noticed the light emanating from its depths wasn't just the heat of the Earth's core, but a golden, reflective coating. Curious, Elias reached out to touch it. The moment he did, he was pulled inside. When Elias opened his eyes again, he found himself in a strange corridor, surrounded by impenetrable walls. In the distance, he saw a faint light and assumed it was the way out. But as he approached, a sudden burst of plasma shot out from the fissure-like opening. In a trance, Elias began to feel as if he were home. He saw himself married to Anita, raising their son and living the life he had always dreamed of. But soon, Elias realized it was all an illusion. When he opened his eyes again, he was trapped in a pitch-black void. It turned out that the magnetic field within the fissure could manipulate the human brain, trapping people in illusions of their deepest desires, making escape nearly impossible. Back in the submarine, Laura took control of the mechanical arm and successfully poured the adhesive into the fissure. Her actions prevented what could have been a planet-destroying disaster. And that concludes A Love Odyssey, the latest disaster movie of 2024. That's all for today's review. See you next time.